Looking back at your preliminary task, what do you feel you have learned in the progression from it to the main task?
I started the preliminary task with some knowledge of camera angles after the practice task I completed a few weeks beforehand. However, I still wasn't too aware of how to use them effectively. I was also more aware of the effectiveness of using features such as match on action, 180-degree rule and soundtrack. Since working in a group in the prelim task, my teamwork skills and communication skills have improved, which has resulted in a final product that I'm happy with. As well as this, I have learnt the importance of researching and planning for time management and keeping to deadlines. The fact we had a change of idea halfway through the planning phase didn't make things much easier, so by carefully planning out what we wanted in detail, we were able to produce a thriller opening that replicated what we wanted to show. During my research, I learnt that handheld shots can make the film look amateur. However, I wanted to create the effect of being in the moment and to represent the delusional mind of the murderer. As well as this, I realised when it was appropriate to use the tripod, and did so when there was not so much action taking place. Since the prelim task, I have furthered my understanding of choosing a location to film. As a group, we changed our mind a couple of times about where we wanted to film our thriller opening. This was a result of logistical problems in finding a more appropriate location. We were originally going to be filming on the field in the college, but it just made more sense logistically to film on this running track, and there were also certain features about it, the bridge and the environment it just made more sense, so we decided to go with that. The soundtrack for the prelim task was created on GarageBand on an iMac using previously recorded sounds on a loop. This didn't sound very professional, and also we used some other song, probably wasn't very appropriate to the task, and it was just quite a tacky piece of film, and it wasn't very good at all. So I decided to take it upon myself to create an original soundtrack on my iPad using the GarageBand app. By doing this, I enabled myself to tamper with the chords and change the pitch in order to create a distorted effect, which was something I thought would be appropriate and conventional to both the genre and the storyline of my thriller opening. I was able to play around with, I think, a violin on there and just slowly scrape up and change the pitch of them, and bringing in different notes, and also using a piano and changing it so you could change the pitch and just mess around with different features. And I recorded it live whilst watching the thriller opening, so I got all the timings pretty much to how I wanted them, so that made it easier. Originally we wanted to use a Frank Sinatra song, That's Life. It was a sort of mockery of the death of the victim, but due to copyright restrictions and a change in plan of what we are going to do with our thriller opening, we didn't. As I just mentioned, my group decided to change the storyline of our thriller opening halfway through the planning phase. This was due to an overcomplicated plot, a problem that I had encountered in the prelim task. We made sure that our storyline was simple whilst featuring as many of the elements that we could into it. In the editing process of the prelim task, I was able to use Final Cut Express with limited knowledge of all the features. In contrast, my group and I were able to edit the footage effectively when it came to the thriller opening. An example of this is when the titles fade in. Due to LiveType not working, we had to make the titles on Final Cut. This required using complex effects, but we were able to overcome this and create reasonable titles. Most of the sounds of my thriller opening are non-diegetic. These include the soundtrack, the snapping of the twig as the murderer steps on it, as we recorded it in the soundproof room. We thought this would be appropriate as we wanted to emphasise the presence of the murderer, which would in turn instigate a reaction from the victim and to turn around. We also created the scraping sound when the murderer pulls his victim into the garage, literally just by doing that. Lighting had a big impact on our ability to film at certain times of the day. As well as this, it made it virtually impossible to refilm part of our opening without having to refilm all of it, due to the foggy weather conditions that we experienced that day. Also, we wanted to represent the dark mind of the murderer, but needed enough light to show the environment. During the part in the garage, we used candlelight to create a chilling effect on the audience. This could lead them to questioning the murderer's intentions and also represents his old-fashioned values. During our first screening of the Thrill opening, we didn't have a soundtrack, and it wasn't very good. We managed to improve it since, and the audience picked up on the lack of lighting, and you couldn't see what was going on, and also the appropriateness of the lighting. So we had to change that by once again editing using different effects on Final Cut, and I think we managed to do it fairly well. In conclusion, I've learned a lot since the prelim task about many features of producing and constructing part of a film, including the effectiveness of camera movements, soundtrack, lighting, editing and locations. Thank you very much.